Alright, so this is June 30th, 2018. Just purchased the Epic 1000 plane for our 4th of July sale we had going on the xplane.org store. I was looking for a faster plane than what I've been using. So I've been using believe it or not, I've been using the 550 Eclipse, the actual jet plane, but I was pretty disappointed with its range. Typically, by the time I'm up to cruising altitude, you got maybe an hour of cruise, and you got to start descending, and 900 miles is about all you can get out of it. And with this plane, you can actually get over 14 to 1600 nautical miles, depending on how hard you're pushing it. So I was pretty impressed by those numbers. And I saw a couple videos with this plane online, and just thought I'd kind of do a quick little overview of it. I'm going to do a short flight. I'm in Stanley Keys in the Bahamas, and I'm going to fly over to Key West. Should be maybe a 35-40 minute flight. And I could just kind of show off a couple parts of the plane, how to operate it. I did go through the checklist a couple times, get familiar with it, and yeah, we'll kind of start now. So Airbus makes this plane. They make a lot of great planes. I really love this pop-up window they have for kind of menus and options. Real easy to use. You know, flight chocks and flags, real easy to remove. The door, open, close. You can add fuel to it right here, remove the fuel, add and remove passengers, luggage. Super easy. They also have the GPU if you need that for external power to start it. We'll be able to start it without it today. The battery shouldn't be too low. I actually just flew down here from Florida and parked it and thought, you know what? Why don't I show you guys a quick little video since I'm a little bit more familiar with how to operate the plane. So let's go ahead and jump inside. And sorry if you keep hearing maybe the mic go on mute. I've been fighting off a cold, so just trying to clear my throat and not have to be loud in your guys' ears. But it's actually got a really nice internal cockpit layout. I like the glass displays. I really love the sky. I think they call it Skyview. Yeah, Skyview. Airbus Avionics. It's the most user-friendly system to operate of anything in X-Plane, and I'll show you just a couple quick things on it. So let's get started. So we have battery 1, battery 2. I'll kind of come down here so you can see a little better. And then the avionics master switch. That's all you need up and running just to kind of get everything set up for the flight. I actually had already loaded in my flight plan, which is, like I said, from the Bahamas down to Key West right here. For anybody who's not familiar with onlineflightplanner.org, it's an amazing website. It'll let you put in your takeoff, departure. You can put in where you're going to be landing, pick an altitude range, and it'll actually flight plan the whole thing with all the waypoints. You can export it to an FMS file, throw it right in your X-Plane 11 folder, and import it into here, and it saves so much time. You come here, click import, and then right there it is. There's your whole flight plan. You don't have to type any of it in. Not that it's that hard on here, but it's just a huge time saver, and I recommend it to everyone. And so let's go ahead and get the airplane started and take off. We won't spend too much time on the ground. This is the radio 1 and radio 2 up here. Radio 1's normally off by default. You have to press this power button to turn it on. That took me a minute to figure out because I couldn't get into air traffic controller when I first loaded up the plane. I'm like, I have every switch down here on. I don't understand what's going on. But just don't forget that up here. This is your actual radio button. And to start this plane, I've seen people do it differently online, which is kind of weird. The checklist is pretty clear on how it should be started, but maybe they just got excited, jumped in a plane before kind of going through it. But what the checklist recommends you do is pick the fuel tank's got the most fuel. Mine are even. If they're even, go ahead and do the left fuel tank. I've already selected it here. You just do that by hitting the button. Go ahead and turn on your fuel pump. And then what you're going to do is you're going to press and hold the starter here until NG hits 10%. Once we're at 10%, you're going to actually start the igniter. That's going to bring up the internal temperature. Once you're about 15%, you're going to introduce the fuel, and then it'll bring itself up to 42%, and you can let off the starter, and it'll be self-sustaining at that point. Because you can't click two things at once, they do recommend you do Control 1 for the starter, and that way you're able to click the igniter and bring the fuel throttle, or the fuel cutoff valve up and get the engines going. So we'll go ahead and get this started. Prop is cleared. We checked that earlier. Go ahead and put our beacon light on so people know we're about to start our engine outside. And it's a real quick process. Very powerful engine in this plane. And that's it. Go ahead and let go of the starter. We'll let the engine stabilize. And the first time I started this plane, I hadn't read through all the documentation. You start getting this little warning light that comes on here, check engine, that starts announcing about every 10-15 seconds or so. I had to look that up, and what that is that's going to come on if your prop RPM is below 900. So once you get it going, just go ahead and bring the throttle, or not the throttle, the condition leveler up till you get above 900, which is almost all the way. So I normally just go all the way and back it off a little bit, and that'll bring it up to the 900 and get rid of that little annoying announcement there. We also, now that we got the engines going, I'm a stickler for air, so make sure our oxygen supply's on for once we get the altitude. We'll turn on the air con. We're nice and low, and the weather's good, so we don't need the window defrost. Get the fan up because I'm pretty sure it's hot down here. I already checked the altimeter, but we can check it again. 3005, so we're good there. And for people who aren't familiar with the Skyview, let me show you how easy this is. So if you want to change your altitude, you just click it. Type it in, 25,000. Enter, that's it. You've set your altitude. You want to change your barometric pressure, type it in, hit enter, you're done. To be honest, there's nothing easier out there. Skyview right here, this is the GPS system. You can click that and go to VOR1, VOR2, or the GPS. The GPS, you can switch between pilot or co-pilot if you want to have something different programmed over here from maybe the VOR. But it's just so easy when all you got to do is click on these buttons and everything works. So just kind of a big props for Aerobask and this system. Now I get a lot of chatter on my regular frequencies, so typically what I'll do is just kind of change this to a random frequency to get this system to be quiet. I have a few add-ons to put a lot of traffic in the air, and it creates a lot of air traffic control constantly like talking because they're telling the planes to go to a certain altitude and the plane's not doing it. So I just turned that off for right now. When I'm running the simulation a little stronger, I'll have that set up a little more, and it's actually pertinent to what we're doing. But for this flight, it's pretty easy. To go over a little bit more of the buttons here, so we have our outside lights, taxi, land, navigation. We're getting ready to go, so we'll go ahead and turn on the taxi. The checklist recommends the pitot stall heat on pretty much all the time. Cruise, climb, descent, takeoff, so we'll go ahead and turn that on. This is the weather and the TCAS master switch, and they work great. There's no weather out here, but as we get closer to Florida, Florida's got a lot of rain going on today, so we'll see that out there. And just take a look at this too. Look at that. We got different barometric settings from left and right side. So truly a pilot co-pilot experience you have going on with the system here. This is our autopilot. We're going to be doing the 27,000 feet. That's this airplane's maximum performance for speed altitude that they recommend. And then we're going to do a climb out at 160 knots. Right now I got the altimeter set to VFR. It's runway's right behind us, so no need to go on ground. And we'll go ahead and turn on the other side's fuel pump, and they tell you to leave it not on automatic fuel flow for takeoff. To be honest, I haven't seen it matter either way, but we'll leave it like the book says. And we're going to turn our standby altimeter, that's this instrument here. Pusher, this is if you're stalling, it will push the front of the airplane down to prevent you from losing control. This is the autopilot. Basically it's like a a power switch to turn on the autopilot system. Same with the trim and pressure system for as we get into altitude. I also, this isn't in the checklist provided at all, the inertial separator, but I've watched Steve-O on YouTube, and basically what he says is when you're low and you're going to get things possibly sucked into the engine, inertial separator should be on to prevent that damage. Once you get higher to a safe altitude, go ahead and take that off to be able to maximize the engine's performance. So I'm going to follow that same principle. Let's go ahead and bring our prop RPM up the rest of the way, and we'll get ready to taxi. Now, online, there's been quite a few complaints that the plane taxis quickly, and to be honest, with the RPM at 9, or the prop RPM at 900 like it is, it does. It'll just at an idle taxi at 25, 30 knots. So what they actually recommend to do is to bring the power level down into beta, and to basically apply just a little bit of reverse as far as the angle of the prop, and that'll actually get you to a more reasonable speed when it comes to taxiing. You can easily hold 9 knots, 10 knots, 15 knots on there, and it just works a lot better that way. So we'll go ahead and taxi out to the runway, take the brakes off. We'll also set our flaps to take off, and again, this is just a really nice looking aircraft. 5 or 6 different skins that they provided with it, just really shows it off nicely. They always do real high quality work. And our ground speed getting a little high, so I'm gonna give it just a little bit more reverse so we don't get up into the 30s. They also said just tap your brakes a little bit to bring that down. You'll also see up here in the top middle, beta mode will light up to show you that you are in that mode. And then with all my flights, I go ahead and prep the navigation and the IAS speed. That way once I've taken off, I can just go ahead and hit the button and call it a day. Now we're at the end of the runway. Slow her down, take her out of beta mode, and line up. Very, very heavy left tendency when this engine powers up. So you gotta be pretty hard on the rudder during takeoff. And they tell you to set takeoff RPM or takeoff torque to 80%, and then release the brakes for taking off. I'm gonna be honest, if you're waiting for it to get to 80%, it's overpowering the brakes. So typically I'll bring it up to 50%, make sure it's stable, get my right rudder in there a little bit, take the brakes off, and bring it the rest of the way for takeoff. Just above the white, so 80 knots is our rollout, or our rotate speed. Hold it 10-degree pitch. 120 is when we're going to bring up the flaps, and of course as soon as you have positive rate of climb, we bring up the landing gear, and they do tell you to tap the brakes too, which is great. Now that we're in the air, go ahead and get this turned into our direction. And I'll typically, what I'll do is wait till we either get to either IAS or in the general direction of our travel before I apply the autopilot, just to give myself a little bit of fun half flying it. But we're pretty much good here. We got a really high bank angle. Let's go ahead and just turn on the autopilot, and that gave me a little bit of free time to walk through a few other features on this plane. Landing light, did it come off automatically when I brought the landing gear? I don't remember. I'll have to check that in the back. But what we have going on right now. So right now we're climbing 160. It'll do 4,000 feet per minute till it gets up into the atmosphere. Thing's amazing. Just a lot of power. But we're going to be going up to the 27,000 feet. Double checking cabin pressure is climbing. So Our pressurization system's working great. There's no real weather that we're flying through, so that's great. We don't have to worry about any icing. These are our icing options down here. And now that we are actually climbing in altitude, we're going to turn on the auto fuel selector, and it'll actually start toggling between left and right tank. It says it does it every 15 nautical miles, so it's pretty often, and it makes a little audio message in the cockpit every time it does switch the tanks for you. So, checklist for the climb. They tell you to keep the engine or prop RPM around 1700. So we can actually bring that back a little bit. Torque up to 100%. NG it's up to 101%. And ITT, they actually tell you to keep it around 750, which, to be honest, I thought that's a little low. At 750 really feels like I'm robbing a lot of power out of the aircraft. So basically what I'm looking to do, if I'm just doing a casual climb, I'll keep everything green. If I want to get up to altitude very fast, I'll push the NG and the ITT up into the yellow, and you'll actually see that right there, yellow, and then this will go up all the way up to 849. Normally my limiting factor is the ITT when it comes to the how much power I can actually put into the engine. It will flash red, and I haven't experienced it yet, but I'm pretty sure you can get an engine fire and cause a lot of problems. We do have a little light on. I forgot. This is why you should always pull up your checklist. Our starting generator should be on. Also, now that we're climbing, we're above 10,000 feet, we can go ahead and turn off the igniter. No real danger of the engine turning off at this point. And that should clear out all of our warning lights here. And so while we let this do its thing, we'll kind of go show you the other view. So this is the normal cockpit view. I use a 80-degree field of view, simply because I don't like having to scroll down to see everything and scroll over just for instruments I commonly look at. So on this plane it works out good. I find on most planes it gives you a big enough field of view that you're not constantly having to pan to go see what you want to click. You also have nice close-up views of all your instruments. We have some rear passenger views. I always set these to look out the window. I'm a big fan of watching landings, and just be honest, this is why I get into flying. This is where it all started for me. It was looking out the window on a big passenger plane and thinking, wow, look at how high we are and how fast we're going. So keep those views alive. And then we have our outside views, as you saw earlier. Great American flag up there. Now a little bit on how this system works. I already showed you how easy it is to change settings just by clicking on what you want to change and literally typing it in and hit enter. When we look at our center view, we'll kind of go to the default. So the default, it's going to look like this. And the autopilot control, you can do it. It's easy to work through these buttons, but when there's dedicated buttons down here, it doesn't make sense to be going through menus to get to those options. We are also high enough to go to VFR. I did file a flight plan through a website that I use for flight simming, but we're not tracking it in the flight, so I always do code 4700, which is what X-Plane always gives you on the default, just to represent being on a IFR flight. But back to our menu here. So in our map, we can pull up. So you go to map option. This is where you get to your flight plan. Adding or removing waypoints is easy. You basically click on it, and you get all these options. Insert a waypoint, remove the waypoint, go direct to the waypoint, activate leg. Real nice system. You can mouse scroll down. We also have, for outside of the flight plan, our info. So say you're trying to pull up an ATIS to a nearby airport, you can go in here, type in the airport or the VOR, and it tells you where it's at. And when I'm flying VFR, I'll come in here and find an airport, click on it, show information, go to the comms. This one doesn't have an ATIS, but if it has an ATIS, you can click this and it'll actually tune your radio to it, which is amazing. Same with the runway information and just the general airport information here. Super well thought out system. From there, we have our plan. If you wanted to step through the flight plan, you can pull both of these up and just mouse scroll through it. Make sure everything looks like it makes sense for what you're doing. I've already pre-planned this one and done this already outside of the simulator. So real simple setup there. Oh, don't forget to change it back. Plan off. You can zoom in and out of here just with the mouse scroll wheel, which is amazing also. Here's some traffic with our TCAS. And then this is time to final and time to next waypoint in minutes and seconds. Very helpful knowing your time to final for planning your descent. Same with the time to waypoint, because what I'll do is I'll go into SkyVector and I'll look up the approach chart for whatever airport I'm landing in, and usually fly that approach. And I try to do everything on autopilot simply because in the flight simulator I just like looking out the window and experiencing the flying of it, just like you would in real life. If I had a nice simulator with motion chairs and wind blowing at me and things like that, I'd be more into hand flying it. But these simulators are so great with the autopilots that I just let them do it themselves. Alright, so we still have everything in the green, climbing at a nice rate. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to go ahead and just kind of stop the video, and we'll fast forward a little bit later once we're a little closer to our destination. Alright, so we're back. Been cruising for a little bit now. 22 minutes till final. So we're going to go ahead and start prepping for the descent. And I actually had a question for you guys out there. On this plane, they don't really tell what to do in the checklist for cruise RPM. They basically just say try to avoid these maximums, which is the 1700, 750 or 760 on the internal temperature. Like I said, I just try to keep everything green. But my question to you guys is, I'm not real sure where to set this, because I can leave it right around 1700 and I'll get the same exact airspeed as if I brought it all the way down to its lowest, which is 1000. But the only difference that I can see from the instruments is I go from burning almost 40 gallons per hour down to half that. So I don't really know what setting is to be in there. I tried looking up the POH for this airplane online. I guess because it's not officially for sale, the real airplane yet, the POH isn't really available. But I'd be curious to know what a real pilot or someone who might know what setting this should be at for cruise should really be at, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because, I mean, I don't mind taking advantage of the extra fuel, but, you know, the whole point of doing the sim is to be realistic. So, I wanted to show you guys how easy it is to load an approach in here. So we're going to be landing on runway 27 at Key West. I didn't check the weather yet, but I just wanted to show you for demonstration purposes how easy it is to load in the arrival. So we click on the waypoint. We're going to click Insert Arrival. We're going to do the RNAV for 27. We'll hit OK. And then we're going to select our navigation points up to it. And we'll do both of those. I was kind of debating on the car new one because that seems a little out of place. Let me check. So it's basically having us fly a big circle. I am going to take that one out. So remove waypoint. Okay. And we need to get rid of one more waypoint in here. Remove waypoint. Check. Alright, so that looks a little better. And according to the approach chart, once we get to Burpee, as they call it, we should be at 1500 feet. And to be honest, that's 17 minutes of descent time, which we're pretty much at now. 14, 16 plus the minute there. So we're going to go ahead and set in our descent. So let's get that off. Zoom that out a little bit so we can see it. And I descend through vertical speed mode, and I typically do 1500 feet per minute. Negative. Enter. And we'll go down here, vertical speed, and select it. Now, to keep the timing right, again, not a real pilot, don't have any official real pilot training, so everything I do could be wrong, but works for me, and if real pilots want to tell me otherwise, perfect. I love the feedback. But to keep the timing on pace is I typically try to keep the ground speed pretty close to the same. I know 250 is going to typically be my max speed once I get below 10,000 feet. They say keep it below 270 for the descent. I don't want to pick up a whole lot of speed on the descent. I'd rather just save the fuel. We will bring the prop RPM up to 1700. That's what the checklist recommends for the descent. And I'll bring the power back to about half. And when I say half, I don't mean half NG or half torque, just half on my my joystick throttle here. And we'll go ahead and let it start the descent. So at this point, it's just basically maintaining. We will, in a little bit, once we get closer, try to see if we can get the ATIS by the time we're down near 18,000 feet. That way we can get our most accurate barometer setting there, or barometric pressure setting. And then once we do get to that first burpees, the first waypoint for getting into the established glide slope, we'll set this to approach mode as well, and I'll let you guys see how easy it is to land this thing. There is actually one other feature I wanted to show you in this system. I've actually found it just by playing around. Didn't realize what it did till like a couple seconds after doing it. But if you go down here and you see there's a button that says jump. And what jump will do, if you're cruising, you can go to a waypoint. So like you would select burpee. If you click jump, it's going to teleport you right to that waypoint. So it's kind of like a time hop or just a fast forward option, but it's instant. Pretty neat feature, you know, perfect for a sim world. Don't think it's a real feature in real life, of course, but just thought I'd share that with you guys. Also, you guys may have noticed my map looks very plain, and that's because I turn off all of the clutter. It's just way too much if we have, when we have all of the items on. So I just want to give you guys what that looks like. Like when I look at a map like that, I can't read anything. Even just turning off some of it, I still feel, and unless I can easily read things, it doesn't do me any good. So I typically turn all that. It keeps your waypoints on, which are part of your fly pan, which is great because some of the other planes don't do that and you just have a line you're following. But I'll typically do this unless, you know, like say I have an engine failure and I'm trying to find an airport nearby. I come here real quick, hit airports, and say, okay, right there it is. That's where I'm going. But that's why my map looks as simplistic as it does. And you'll see here the cabin pressure is going down on its own as well. That's all automatic. Really easy to use system. And they do tell you before landing to make sure this is neutralized at 0, 0. If you get down to like on an instrument approach where you're doing the last 10 miles, you know, basically at or near the pressure you're going to be landing at, it has plenty of time to do it on its own. I haven't really had to be held up by that. And I'll go ahead and take a quick moment to apologize for the audio in this video. I actually, for some reason, I don't know why yet, but the game or the simulator audio wasn't being piped through. So actually anything you hear on the simulator is what's being picked up on my mic. My mic's a little extra sensitive as well, which is why you sometimes hear my chair squeak or the clock in the background. But that was just me being a poor video recorder, so I apologize for that. You can also since she has a few more minutes on this descent. You can change these buttons. So from heading, you can assign it to be a barometric button. It's nice having the option, but because you can just click in here and do the same thing, it's kind of redundant. Also, this instrument panel, you can add or remove that as well. So if we go to screen, EMS page, that's the engine management system page. The PFD page, can't turn that off. That's always going to be displayed, but that's this page here. You can turn that off on the Copilot side, I believe. Let's take a quick look. Let's just say you wanted it to be the map. You could do that. That's more useful on some of the other planes. Some of the other planes, this middle screen is a completely different screen, and then the only way to get to map is by doing it on the other side. But for this, that's a good enough view here. You can also pull up the map here if you're really desperate and don't want to look over. Plus, you can change the side that it's on with the layout button. If you do get a message, sometimes this will pop up with like a engine fire or the any type of error code can pop up into this window too, and you can clear it out here with the dismiss button and then go back to get out of it. The primary flight display, you can go in here and change the settings for, so this is the source, this is what bearing you're going. You can turn TCAS off and on here. You can have it display your Mach speed in case you're trying to do your cruise based off of that. You can also go under here, under engine, and change it from gallons to weight to, or liters or pounds. Expander, we've already been through that. Tools, this is where you can go through different settings with your communication systems or your clock from local to Zulu. Start time, if you're going to be timing your flights, which I recommend you do. I actually have a separate program that runs in the background that times my flights. That way you have a good idea of what your fuel burn is and what your course should be in case for some reason something stopped working on your GPS. You know how far you are into your flight and you can work that out. We are below 18,000 feet, so we should be picking up our altimeter. I think we're a little far to pick up Key West, but we'll try it. We'll see if we set the ATIS. Do we hear it? No ATIS yet, so we're going to pick it up old school.
Echo
3002.
0 Kilo Mike Tango Hotel Altimeter 3002. Kilo Mike Tango.
Alright, and I'll leave the ATIS tuned up here. That way once we get in range it'll come up on its own. Get the flight plan back up. 12 minutes to final. We're staying under our 250. We are actually 489. We're still actually doing pretty good on the descent. I think our pace is looking alright. Once we get below 10,000 feet, we'll go ahead and turn on the land. And we're actually low enough. The skies are clear. I'm going to put the transponder back on VFR. And we'll get out of the... oh, here's what I was talking about with the... if you set to a common frequency, you get a lot of clatter or chatter up here. Let's get rid of that. You know what's going on? We got to put it back to the ATIS. That's why we're hearing that. There we go. Alright. Back to the flight plan. Alright, descent's looking good. And you know what? We got a moment. Let's see if we can get the checklist up real quick. We will go aircraft, Aerobas, the Epic 1000, documents, checklist normal, move it over here. Oh, you know what? My bad. That's a little better. Get a real weird look in that window if you do it like that. And let's just double check our descent. Under 270, power is required, that's fine. Pitot heat is on, we left that on. ADS, we haven't checked it yet, we're not in range. I've already briefed through the approach charts, navigation is set. External lights on once you're below 10,000 feet, okay. Before landing, the auto fuel selector switch off and put it on the foot. Oh, there's our ATIS. And arriving runway is 9. So you know what? Let's do it right. Let's delete the arrival and put in the right one. Insert arrival. Runway 9. None. Stinger strap. I'm going to do none. And this is going to give us this great... Sorry about that. This is going to give us this great mess of directions here. Basically going to overfly the runway and do a complete U-turn. Let's put in that waypoint. You know what? I should have... I had a strong feeling looking at the wind that it was going to be the other runway, but I should have looked it up before I started recording. Alright, arrival, RNAV 9, and we will do steam. That way it's not a complete U-turn. And you know what? There's no need to go to Joyce. We'll go direct to Sting. So let's remove this waypoint. And that makes it look a little more pleasant. And of course now our flight's a lot longer, so we'll have a little bit of time to cruise down at the 1,500 foot mark. It's also nice when you load the arrival, it automatically puts in there to the missed approach and where you go for the hold. That nice little touch to it. So as we were doing on the checklist, we're below 10,000 feet, so we should have our external lights on. Taxi light won't come on unless the wheels are out, so just your land lights is all you're gonna be turning on here. And then as we do get lower, we don't need the extra power. The inertial separator, if you had that off, you can go ahead and turn that back on. And I believe it's gonna have us turn the igniter on as well, so let's double check the checklist. Before landing, tanks fullest, flaps, gear down, final check, fully forward. No mention, oh there it is, igniter on the final check should be on. So we will hold on to that one when we're on our final approach. We all look green here, speed's getting close to the 250, so we're going to keep an eye on that, make sure we don't overdo it. Again, I've had the power set at about 50% this whole time, which seems to be perfect for the 1,500 foot descent rate. So while we're waiting, we'll go ahead and prep what happens on the landing phase. So I typically hold off gear and flaps until I'm established on the glide slope. Then introduce flaps first, depending on what has the higher speed, flaps or gear. Gear, typically I wait till I'm on the final waypoint, basically final before the runway. And on this plane, it's 180, or you'll see the white line up for the first set of flaps, 150 for the gear, and then 130 for flaps at landing setting. And they want you to do your approach between 90 and 100 knots, and to be honest, it still flies at 80 knots, so once you're starting to get over the airport, you're going to bring it down from 90 down to the 80 knot mark, and wait till you're just above the ground and bring the throttle back to idle. You also want your condition and RPM on full on the final leg of your landing approach as well, just in case you got to do the go around. You'll have your maximum power for making that happen. We'll enjoy a little bit of views real quick. That's a long bridge there. There's actually a 7-mile bridge that goes to Key West. I guess if I was looking at the map, I'd know if that was it or not. We're getting a little hot on our speed, so we're going to go ahead and bring that down. These last couple of 1,000 feet, you're going to be almost near idle when it comes to that power. One thing I do like about the jet is the jet autopilot does have an auto throttle option. So once you put this in, you can put in the auto throttle as well. And I usually keep the auto throttle on all the way down to maybe the last, maybe minimums usually actually. And then on minimums, turn off the autopilot and do that last little bit in by hand. But just the less things you got to worry about, the easier it is to fly. Especially when you're trying to do a video at the same time and you're trying to think of something to talk about. So just helps out. Alright, just change the fuel tanks again on us. Alright, so while we're finishing this, let's see what else I can show you guys. Some people want to know computer specs and settings. So I am running I'll actually show you guys one moment here. See if it says in here. Here we go. 5820K, and it is overclocked to 4.2, but its base speed it's normally 3.3. And then for my graphics card, I have a GTX 980 Ti, and I put 32 gigs of RAM in. You know, to be honest, I only did that because I have quad channel support for RAM, and I wanted to fill in all the channels for it. I could actually double that and have dual quad channel support, but I never come anywhere near the 32 gigs, so there's no point in doing that. And I don't know how it happened or why it happens. Other than at big airports, I actually get really good frame rates on the max settings, which is kind of amazing because you go and look at everyone else's setup online and they got to turn reflections off, or sorry, shadows off and reflections down to minimum just to get somewhat decent flying experience. And I don't have that problem at all. I did when I first got X-Plane. And I don't know if it's through some of the add-ons I've put in or various settings I've tweaked down the road. I do know overclocking the CPU helped quite a bit because the faster you can get that CPU running, the smoother it does. And the CPU tends to be the limiting factor on X-Plane almost every time. I do have to lower the settings down if I fly into a major airport. But to be honest, I don't really like flying into the big airports because it takes so long to taxi to and from the gate, especially if you have the traffic on and you're trying to run the simulator realistically. To do an hour flight and then spend 40 minutes taxiing is just not fun for me. I do like to lay it off certain airports like Orlando, OIA, KMCO. Really beautiful airport, especially if you download the map from X-Plane Org Store. They got it looking identical to what it looks like in real life. Real nice airport. Las Vegas is also a great airport to fly into because you have the Strip. They do a great job with that. You can fly into LaGuardia, but I'll be honest, LaGuardia, that'll drop my frame rates pretty bad. And if you turn down I'll show you the setting. If you turn down the world objects from maximum, even just one click down, it leaves out so many buildings. It kind of kills the experience for me. So I'd rather fly into some of the smaller regional airports and keep that max setting all the way up. Or even if I'm flying over, like say I'm flying into San Francisco. San Francisco's suburban area around it, if you turn that off at maximum just down one click, there's so many patches of scenery missing. It just ruins it. So I leave it on maximum, and I'll let the frame rate drop. It'll go down to maybe 24, 25. Still fine for flying. You know, I wouldn't do it in a fighter jet. It would be a bad experience there. But when you're landing at 100 knots or coming in your approach at 180, it still loads fast enough to be a smooth experience, so doesn't bother me at all. And we're low enough. We're gonna go ahead and turn on the igniter, just to be sure in case something bad were to happen at the engine at this point. We also have this button down here. I couldn't find any good information on it. It's ground fresh air. So you know what? We're low enough. Let's make sure we're getting some fresh air in here. Kind of wish some of these fuses could do stuff. It's always great if you turn on like the random failures. It's great to try to dissect what's going wrong with the plane if you have a mid-flight failure. You can also turn on the yoke on these. It's really nice looking yoke, but I don't like covering up the buttons. But you can do that here, or you can do it in the options. Sorry about that. Hide and show the yoke. TCAS alerts you can turn off and on here as well. They claim it's experimental, but it works great. Also, the torque limiter you can turn off and on. So what that'll do is you'll notice if you throw it full power, it'll spike up and then it'll bring itself back down on the torque. That's part of the auto torque. It tries to prevent you from over torquing the engine and causing damage. You can remove that if you need to. Just be very mindful of how much power you're giving it. And there's also an option down here, because the power is also controlled through the engine management system. You can override that as well and push the power up way higher than it should be for safe flight. Again, it's there if there's a failure in the system and you need that to maintain proper power settings, but otherwise leave it all on automatic and just move your power accordingly. Let's get this up to 1700, and we should be getting ready to turn in to get in line with our runway. This would be getting ready to turn on a base in a moment here. And I don't know if you guys can hear it because I don't have the audio coming through on the simulator, but it does tell you when you're approaching your waypoints as well, which is a nice little reminder, especially if you're doing a long flight and you're not going to be sitting here, or you're maybe watching a Netflix video at the same time, you know, like the real pilots do. It gets that little audio reminder so you can just remember to kind of look back, make sure everything's going smoothly. And like I was telling you guys earlier, if you're down at altitude with a little bit of time to spare like we just did here, you'll see the cabin pressure, it drops where it needs to be on its own. You're not really stuck waiting on that. Some of the other planes I have flown, the pressure does take a while. If you descend, you know, quickly, you can be stuck waiting on that. But this plane so far has been doing a really good job with it. So while we're waiting to turn our final here, I'll just kind of throw out there, this is my first video kind of doing anything with X-Plane, actually anything gaming related at all, that has me commentating on it. I talk for a living in customer service, and to be honest, to come home and talk for another hour and a half isn't really the most fun thing to me, but I love watching videos. I'll watch the real flights, you know, Steve-O won Knievo. I'll watch Premier One Driver, Flight Chops. There's another guy out there I just started watching too, really good. Jess Flies, I think is what it's called. He flies a, oh, what's the name of that plane? It's the fastest single pilot jet that you can buy, and they always fly co-pilot, or two-pilot, which is kind of funny. But they do it because they take passengers, and I think that's part of their either business model or the flight regs, that if you have a passenger and you're in a jet, you got to have the two pilots. But I also watch all the flight sim videos. So you got Q8 Pilot, Thomas Ramson. They're like, I just enjoy flying and learning, and I thought, you know what, I put a lot of research into these things, that maybe I'd share some of that and you know, the more perspectives you get with anything and the larger the community gets, the more fun you typically have and the more you want to do it. So that's kind of where this video came from. There weren't a lot of videos on this plane that I saw on YouTube that really went over the details on it, and before I'm going to put down any money to buy a plane, you know, $20, $30, some of these planes, especially if you get the professional ones, are $80 and more. You want to see some good reviews on it and really know what you're buying beforehand. And I'll be honest, I made the mistake of, I bought a Coronado plane. It's one of their jets, and the plane flies great, but the autopilot system in it won't load airways, and it's a nightmare to try to set that up and navigate on it. And it doesn't work like this system does, where you can just click on things and type it in, and you got to do the dial and you got to select it over one letter at a time. And when you got to put in 10 waypoints and you got to do it one letter at a time and hit enter, and you know, you're trying to navigate this mouse button, that's a pain in the butt. And I know you can set keyboard shortcuts to it as well, but I don't want to spend an hour setting up my flight. It's just way too tedious. I like it where I can, you know, go to a website, load the flight plan, or just put in a couple waypoints in a couple minutes and get it up and running, and then get out to flying and enjoying it. I'm also, maybe a little bit of advice from you guys. Right now I'm running the default weather system in X-Plane. I was wondering what you guys thought as far as add-ons to get a little bit more realistic rain and cloud building effects. I know there's the one add-on out there. I can't remember what it's called, but you have to pay for it to get it. And to be honest, I've seen some videos on it, and I've seen some videos compared to X-Plane, and I don't know, nothing was really standing out to me. So maybe some fresh perspectives from you guys would help clear that up. But any feedback you guys have for me as well, I'd love to hear that. Alright, so we're getting real close here. We're down less than 5 minutes. And then what I'll typically do is, when we're right now we're turning our direct base. Before we turn our final, I like to slow the plane way up. That way, when it does do the turn, it doesn't overshoot. A lot of times what will happen, especially if you're going 240, 250 knots, is the plane will go to turn for its final, and it'll overshoot it quite a bit. And then by the time you're to the next waypoint, it's still not on track to cross the glide slope. So just slowing it down before you get there solves all those problems. And since we're prepping for landing, we're going to make sure we have our prop RPM speed all the way up. And let's double check the ATIS, make sure nothing's changed. It's 3003 now. Just a little bit of a difference there. And we're going to go ahead and hit the approach button as well. So that way when we do get in line with our glide slope, we'll see if it does it. We'll see if it starts descending on the glide slope. So we are now down into the green, or sorry, the white. We're going to drop our flaps down one level. That's going to bleed off a lot of speed. And I'm going to actually hold it up a little bit faster because I'm not quite ready to drop the landing gear. I'm going to wait till we're actually established in the glide slope to do the landing gear and the final set of flaps. And just look at those views. I actually downloaded the what are they called? The Ortho 4X or whatever it is. It's the satellite photos for all of Florida, which is where I live, so that's where I do most of my flying. And I'll be honest, it's amazing. It's very realistic. I can't remember if I have it turned on right now, but if you ever get a chance to do it, and you download the high res videos, just be in mind you're going to get some angry letters from your internet service provider. It's several hundred gigs of information to terabytes, depending on how large of an area you do. But it's pretty cool if you can fly over your house and see your actual house on the ground, especially in a flight sim world. So it's worth doing it for a small area, maybe the airport you like to take off and land at the most, or your home base. I'd recommend it. There's a few tutorials online. Some of the good tutorials are over an hour long, so I recommend supplementing that with maybe a text tutorial so you're not missing everything or anything. But once you get it a good understanding of it, you find out it's just a couple programs you download and hit a couple buttons, and really you just wait forever for the download to happen. Alright, so Bisbee, we should be seeing this coming down at any moment now. I believe this waypoint is the actual waypoint for the intercept. Take a look at my approach chart. Bisbee 1500, that's where the glide slope starts. Okay. And since we got a quick second, let's double check this. Speed's good, altitude, that's all great. Before landing, fuel is the last thing we got to do besides the landing gear and the flaps. Fully forward we've already done. Igniter's good. We're already at 0 differential. And we're going to be shooting for our 90-100. If you got to go ground, it's the same procedure as the takeoff. And after landing, just clean the airplane up. Alright. So, let's go ahead. That's what I was waiting for. It just auto switches fuel tanks. We're going to go ahead and turn that off. And again, my fuel tanks are even, so it doesn't matter which one we have it set on. And you can see we've established ourselves in the glide slope. So we're going to drop the landing gear so we don't pick up too much speed. Still shows a good establish. Landing gear's down, 3 green. We're going to start bringing it on down. We're under 130. Drop our flaps to full. And then this is where we'll let the airspeed stabilize around 100 knots. Now this plane's got a lot of power, which is very convenient because you have like a lot of control. Like you can move the stick just a little bit to gain or remove that last bit of throttle. And I didn't check what minimums were for this airport, but it's going to be a VFR landing anyways, so we can cancel the autopilot whenever. I'll wait till we're a little bit lower. Take a quick look at our views. See the tennis courts there? Oh, yeah, some cruise ships. That's pretty cool. Oh, look at that tower. Come on, air traffic control. You should have warned me about those. Alright, this is good enough. So, I actually have a master disconnect switch on my joystick. Just hit that button. Takes care of the yaw dampener as well. Inertial separator's on. Landing lights are on. Speeds checks good. Flaps and landing gear are down. Alright, let's just bring it in. And for newer pilots out there, if you're doing instrument, you follow the glide slope. I'm a little high. When you're doing visual, I always look at the end of the runway and make sure I'm lined up with that. That's really, really helpful tip to keep yourself straight. And then try to maintain your glide slope with power and not with pitch. You want to keep your pitch about the same. And a typical glide slope is going to have you going down around 400 to 500 feet per minute. I'm going to actually get a little more power in there so we can clear these trees. I don't think those trees are supposed to be that close to the runway. Wind is just a straight headwind. Maintaining our 90. Alright, we're looking good. We're going to hold it up a little higher. Make sure we're clear of those trees. Alright, let's bring it on down. Leaving a lot of runway behind us, but I'm going to be honest, I don't think those trees are supposed to be there. Alright, flare up. Throttle to idle. We're down. Nose down. We'll put on beta to slow it down. Bring the throttle back. I'm going to leave beta on for the taxi. Just a little bit of brake so we can make this first exit. We're down to a reasonable ground speed. Alright, flaps up. Go ahead and clean up the airplane. We're off the runway, so landing lights off, taxi lights on, and we're going to go straight in. And I don't honestly know where to park this plane, so let's just take a quick look. Well, we're facing the wrong way for that. We'll follow this taxi line up here. If you hear that weird noise, that's the beta thrust going for reverse. If you go past a certain power setting, it'll make that sound just default. Doesn't matter what the engine's actually doing. And that guy driving that fuel truck is drunk, clearly. Okay, so this will take us into a spot. Alright. I'm going to go ahead and turn beta off. Bring the throttle back. And we're going to make this hard U-turn into whatever gate this is. And I'll inch it forward. That's good. Set my parking brake. Brake set. And then let's go ahead and cut off the engine. Well, actually, we'll cut off the air first. What else runs off the engine that we don't need on? Pressure air off, trim, autopilot can come off, pusher can come off, that's fine, pitot heat off, TCAS, taxi light, nav strobe keep beacon on, igniter off, standby off, and now we can cut back our throttle. Alright, transponder can go ahead and go to off. Is there an off standby? There we go. And that's it. That's the whole flight. Give you a quick view of the outside real quick. Finish cleaning this up. And let's hop outside. And get these people out of the plane. Where's those luggage carts? There we go. Alright guys, really appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoyed the video.